Living by the lake had always been a dream come true for me. There was something magical about stepping out into the fresh morning air, hearing the gentle lap of waves against the shore and knowing that the water was just a few steps away. My house wasn't anything extravagant, but the location made it feel like a slice of paradise. That's why I decided to install a small heated pool in my backyard. The lake, while picturesque, wasn't always practical for swimming, especially during the colder months. My pool became my sanctuary, a place where I could unwind and enjoy the view without freezing. It was on one of these peaceful mornings that my tranquility was shattered. I had just finished a swim in the pool and stepped inside to take a call from my brother. The conversation was longer than I expected, and as soon as it ended, I rushed back outside to find something that made my jaw drop. A strange woman sitting in my deck chair, and her son splashing around in my pool. At first I froze, unsure whether I was hallucinating. I rubbed my eyes, but the scene remained the same. My deck chair, which had been holding my sunscreen and hat, now held an unfamiliar woman who radiated the energy of someone who believed the world owed her everything. Clearing my throat, I stepped closer and said, "Excuse me, but what are you doing here?" The woman, let's call her Karen, looked up at me with a mixture of surprise and disdain. "Oh, is this your house?" she asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Yes, this is my property," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Why are you here?" Karen sighed as if I had asked the most obvious question in the world. "My son wanted to swim, but the lake's too cold. I saw your pool and figured it wouldn't be a big deal." Her words left me momentarily speechless. Who in their right mind thought it was okay to waltz onto someone else's property and use their pool without permission? Gathering my composure, I replied, "This is private property. You can't just come in and use my pool." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, relax. We'll only be here for a little while. It's not like we're hurting anything." "That's not the point," I said, my patience wearing thin. "You're trespassing. I need you to leave." Instead of apologizing, Karen crossed her arms and glared at me. "You don't have to be so rude. I'm just trying to make my son happy. Don't you care about children?" "I care about respecting boundaries," I shot back. "Now please get off my property." Karen's son, oblivious to the tension, continued to splash around in the pool. I turned to him and said, "Hey buddy, you need to get out now." "That was a mistake." Karen shot up from the chair, her face red with fury. "How dare you talk to my child like that? He has feelings too, you know. Do you want him to catch hypothermia from the lake water?" I blinked. "The lake water isn't my responsibility. Neither is your child. Please leave or I'll have to call the police." Karen's eyes narrowed and she smirked. "Go ahead. Call them. I'll just tell them you threatened my child. Let's see who they believe." For a moment, I was stunned into silence. Karen, however, wasn't finished. She turned to her son and said sweetly, "It's okay, honey. This mean man wasn't raised to share. But I'll teach you better." Her words lit a fire in me. I'd never been good at coming up with snappy comebacks on the spot, but this time, something clicked. If I wasn't raised properly, then you weren't raised at all. You're acting like an entitled child. Karen's jaw dropped, and for a moment, she looked genuinely speechless. But instead of arguing further, she stormed over to her son, yanked him out of the pool, and grabbed her things. As she walked off my property, she kicked over the deck chair and yelled a string of expletives before flipping me off. I stood there, heart pounding, watching her retreating figure. Part of me was fuming, but another part felt a small sense of victory. Still, I couldn't shake the unease that lingered. What if she came back? What if she tried to escalate things further? The days following the incident with Karen were anything but peaceful. At first I thought that would be the end of it. She'd embarrassed herself, and surely she wouldn't want to risk another confrontation. But I underestimated the audacity of people like her. It started with small things. I'd find my deck chair moved, my pool cover tampered with, and strange footprints in the grass. At first I thought it might be animals or kids from the neighborhood. But then I saw the note. It was scrawled in messy handwriting and left on my patio table. "You're selfish and don't deserve this house." The note made my stomach churn. Was Karen coming back? Or was this someone else she'd ranted to about her perceived injustice? Either way, it was unsettling. The next morning, I decided to take some precautions. I called a local security company and arranged to have cameras installed around the property. It felt a little excessive, but the idea of having proof of any future incidents gave me peace of mind. While waiting for the installation, I noticed more signs of trespassing. A few pool toys I hadn't seen before were left by the edge of the water, and there were muddy footprints leading from the gate to the pool area. Clearly, someone had been there again, and I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who it was. I decided to take action. The next time I left the house, I locked the gate leading to the backyard and even put up a sign that read, "Private property, no trespassing." It was a bold move, but I wanted to make it clear that my pool wasn't open for business. That afternoon, as I returned home from running errands, I heard raised voices coming from the backyard. My heart sank. I hurried to the gate and peered through the slats. Sure enough, Karen was there, arguing with someone else, a neighbor perhaps. "Who do you think you are, putting up this sign?" Karen shouted. "This neighborhood is supposed to be friendly and welcoming." "This isn't your property, Karen," the neighbor replied firmly. "If he doesn't want people using his pool, that's his right." I pushed open the gate and stepped into the yard, interrupting the argument. "Karen, what are you doing here again?" She spun around, her face a mix of anger and indignation. "I was just trying to explain to your neighbor how rude you've been," she said. "You think you can just lock people out and put up signs? This isn't a gated community." "This is my property," I said firmly. "You don't have any right to be here. Leave now, or I'll call the police." Karen glared at me, then turned on her heel and marched away, muttering under her breath. The neighbor gave me an apologetic look and followed her out, shaking his head. The incident left me rattled, but it also strengthened my resolve. The security cameras were installed the next day, and I began reviewing the footage regularly. For a few days, everything seemed quiet, and I started to relax. Then, late one night, the motion sensor on my phone went off. I opened the app to see Karen and her son back at the pool, trying to pry off the cover. This time, I wasn't going to let it slide. By the time the cameras were installed, I felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Karen hadn't returned, but I wasn't about to let my guard down. The system was set up to notify me of any movement in the backyard, and it gave me peace of mind knowing I'd have proof if anything happened again. One evening, as I reviewed the day's footage out of curiosity, something caught my eye. A shadowy figure near the pool. I hit rewind and played it back. It was unmistakable. Karen, in the dead of night, sneaking into my yard. She wasn't alone. Her son was with her, and they were trying to remove the pool cover. This time, I wasn't going to let it slide. It was around midnight, and the backyard was cloaked in shadows. I could see Karen gesturing to her son, whispering instructions as they fumbled with the pool cover. They had no idea they were being recorded. My heart pounded as I weighed my options. Should I confront them or call the police? Grabbing my phone, I dialed the local police department's non-emergency line. The dispatcher listened patiently as I explained the situation and assured me that an officer would be dispatched immediately. My hands were shaking as I ended the call, but I knew I had made the right choice. A few minutes later, red and blue lights illuminated my street as a police cruiser pulled up to my driveway. I stepped outside to greet the officer and guided him to the backyard, where Karen and her son were still fiddling with the pool cover, completely oblivious to the commotion. The officer shone his flashlight toward them, and Karen froze like a deer in headlights. "Ma'am, what are you doing here?" he asked, his tone firm but professional. Karen quickly recovered, plastering a fake smile on her face. "Oh, officer, there must be some misunderstanding. My son and I were just checking on our friend's pool. He said we could use it anytime." I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside me. "That's a lie. This is my property, and I've told her multiple times to stay off it. I have everything recorded on my security cameras." Karen's smile faltered as the officer turned to her. "Is that true, ma'am? Do you have permission to be here?" She hesitated, clearly realizing her story wasn't going to hold up. "Well, I mean, we didn't think it would be such a big deal. It's just a pool." The officer shook his head. "Trespassing is a serious matter. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately. If you return, you'll be arrested." Karen huffed, her face red with embarrassment and fury. She grabbed her son's hand and stormed out of the yard, muttering under her breath about unfriendly neighbors and overreacting homeowners. As the officer turned to leave, he offered me some advice. If she comes back, don't hesitate to call us. You're well within your rights to protect your property. After the officer left, I finally felt a sense of closure. Karen had been warned, and I knew she wouldn't risk another run-in with the law. Over the next few weeks, I monitored my security footage religiously, but there were no signs of her or her son. It seemed she had finally gotten the message. The entire ordeal had been exhausting, but it also taught me an important lesson about standing up for myself. My backyard was my sanctuary, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. From that day forward, I made it a point to enjoy my pool even more, savoring the peace and quiet I had worked so hard to protect.